I think we're all familiar with the Harvey Dent line about dying a hero or living long enough to see yourself become the villain. But I'm not sure all of us were expecting that to happen to crypto and even Cardano in 2023. Ready? Let's go. Today, we're going to discuss the vilification of one of the most established institutions in all of crypto, a rumor about who the SEC is going after next, some speculations about impacts of all of this on the party of the current administration, and Charles reminding everyone of some facts that might be inconvenient for the SEC regarding Cardano. If you're more uncomfortable with this guy's choice of an off-brand laptop than you are of him obviously being a masked villain, or if you're finding value in these videos each weekday, please consider delegating to the Army of Spies stake pool, ticker AOS. Well, guys, we are now in that part of the timeline when all of us in crypto are pretty much being branded as villains. We're not, adherents to this original idea of Satoshi that he might be able to create, they might be able to create more economic freedom for the entire world by creating a currency, a digital currency that would be immune to the inflationary instincts of a central bank. No, that's not what we are. We're just a bunch of villains out doing villainous things at this point. And we see this most prominently with what's happening right now to Coinbase. Not too long ago, Coinbase was kind of the darling of the crypto scene. Coinbase was basically the only public entity. It had gone through the entire process of registration with the SEC, had an initial public offering, it was trading, all those good things. Something that we could have only dreamed about in crypto, only, half a decade ago, let alone a decade ago. The public status of Coinbase in a lot of ways, I think, made all of us think that maybe Coinbase was the most unassailable. It would have probably been the last entity we'd expect for the federal government to go after. After all, they'd been approved as a public entity by the SEC. So you'd think that the SEC wouldn't then, and their business model basically hasn't changed since then. You wouldn't expect the SEC to turn around and then go after Coinbase. But here we are, as we've described in detail on this channel, Coinbase, obviously the target of the SEC right now. So what is Brian Armstrong doing? He's doing exactly what you'd expect him to do, exactly what he should be doing. He understands that there are basically two cases to fight. There's the case that's going to happen in the courts, and there's the case that's going to happen in the courts of public opinion. So he's out doing exactly what he should be doing. He's telling Coinbase's side of the story. And here he's in a 28-minute video, an interview with the Wall Street Journal, where he's talking about all the things you'd expect. He's talking about his definition of a security, what he thinks the status of all the different tokens and coins on the Coinbase platform are, all of those good things. And you would expect that the crypto scene would sort of rally behind this, embrace his attempts to defend really not just Coinbase, but all of crypto. You'd think that that would be what would happen. And of course, we've seen examples in the past where different projects in crypto, different companies have gotten in trouble with the SEC, and all of crypto hasn't rallied behind those projects. And you can feel different ways about that. In some cases, I think we'd all agree that there were probably projects that it was good for the SEC to go after because they were doing bad things. They weren't really, it wasn't the case that they were just, good contributors to the crypto ecosystem. They were actually doing bad things, and it's good that the SEC went after them. That's not the case with all of the targets of the SEC, obviously. We won't get into, which enforcement actions were good, which were bad, but I think it's pretty easy to agree that the SEC going after Coinbase is probably pretty bad for all of crypto. And it seems to be the case, given the enforcement actions against Kraken and Binance, basically simultaneously all this year, months dividing them in the case of the Kraken and Binance and Coinbase cases, complaints, but it's pretty bad for crypto. They're obviously trying to cripple the fiat on-ramps and off-ramps. But what's interesting to talk about today is not all of that. It's the villainization of Coinbase. So We've obviously got Coinbase out there through its CEO, Brian Armstrong, trying to plead its case in the court of public opinion. But there are also forces on the other side of that equation, not just the SEC, but other parties, kind of aligned that have joint interests in seeing Coinbase villainized that are already hard at work trying to villainize the once seemingly unassailable Coinbase. Here we see a post by an account that has a Bitcoin symbol in the name and, not a huge following, but 11.1 thousand followers on Twitter. And what do they say? Not, hey, here's a 28-minute interview with Brian Armstrong, defending Coinbase. They say, Brian Armstrong squirms and gives a non-answer when asked if Coinbase invests in projects that they later list to trade for retail customers. They do. And while, of course, there's something to be said for this. It is interesting that Coinbase is investing in projects and then listing those projects, potentially, allegedly. I think this post is obviously alleging they do. This is something I think most of us probably knew, that Coinbase, has some capital and it deploys that capital to invest in projects. And, some of those projects, if they believe they're worthy of investment of capital, they probably also are going to believe that those projects are worthy of being listed on their platform. And, maybe that's unfair to some projects. You might disagree with the projects they embrace. Certainly there's projects that, Coinbase may have embraced. Like, for instance, this post says, I don't know if this is true or not, but it says, I would just like to bring up that Coinbase Ventures invested into Aptos and was contributing code for Aptos. Coinbase announced day one support for Aptos blockchain, the exact moment the blockchain would go live. Does my opinion differ from Coinbase in that regard? Certainly it does. It took Coinbase a really, really long time to list Cardano. Did I think that was great? Not at all. Do I agree with Coinbase that they should have embraced Aptos? Would I have personally embraced Aptos if I was Coinbase? Certainly not. I would not have invested a bunch of money in them, according to this post, and then given them day one support on the platform. But I think there's a lot of things you could disagree with. Coinbase is a very large actor in the crypto ecosystem. There are a lot of decisions Coinbase has made that you could disagree with, but I don't think that's really what's going on here. I think this is the beginning of a theme. It's sort of like Coinbase is under siege, as is Binance, as was Kraken, just a short time ago. And all of the parties that would have something to gain from Coinbase taking, as much of a beating as possible, they're all kind of jumping in to sort of vilify Coinbase now. Like, I think we can assume this poster has the Bitcoin symbol in their avatar there, in their PFP. You could argue, yeah, it'd probably be great for Coinbase. It'd probably be great for, some people who are Bitcoin maximalists would say it'd be great for Bitcoin if it was much harder for people to get a hold of all these altcoins. All these coins, the way a lot of people, at least in North America, the way they, acquire those coins is through these centralized exchanges like Binance and Coinbase and Kraken. That's sort of the gateway where people can deposit fiat and get into a bunch of these coins. And I think a lot of people who, might be Bitcoin maximalists, they're looking at that and like, okay, great. If Coinbase goes away, maybe Coinbase could even go away here. Maybe if Coinbase takes a beating or goes away and Binance takes a beating or goes away, it'll just be harder for people to acquire those other altcoins. It doesn't make a lot of sense because it would also make it much harder for people to acquire Bitcoin. But I think a lot of people in that kind of community see Coinbase's embrace of altcoins in general as offensive. And of course, no matter what sort of coin ecosystem you do embrace, whether it's Cardano or Solana or Aptos, Sui, Avalanche, Ethereum, Bitcoin, no matter what it is, people who don't embrace that ecosystem and only embrace some other ecosystem are going to be offended by your stance. And this is sort of the bigger theme. I think we see this going on at this micro level in crypto. We see people, anytime any entity or project, gets attacked by regulators, they're sort of cheering on the sidelines because they think, it's a zero-sum game and what's bad for that project is good for their project. We see that on the micro level, but we also see this going on at the macro level. I think crypto in general has been a victim of this. We've been villainized by the party of the current administration in the White House, maybe mostly just because we were embraced by the other party. I don't think it's any secret that a lot of people in crypto generally, historically, have been of kind of libertarian leanings, and that kind of political sensibility is very much associated with the right. And we've sort of entered this era of U.S. politics where no matter what, the issues aren't decided, on the merits. There is no philosophy outside of the philosophy of the parties. So just because crypto seemed to be a thing that was embraced by certain segments, at least of the right, I would argue that we've recently had presidents from the right-leaning party that very much did not seem to embrace crypto at all. Even though they later used crypto to sell some NFTs, they didn't seem to embrace crypto very strongly when they were in office. But crypto very much was perceived to be a right-wing thing, and it was like sort of, therefore, the left must oppose, target, and attack crypto. It's kind of hard to make the case when you make the case like, why is the left so ferociously attacking crypto? It's kind of hard to make the case that, crypto necessarily is anything that should be seen as in opposition to the, political stances of the left. It's just sort of that it was embraced by the right because crypto had been embraced by the right, and so many people, executives, central figures in crypto seem to have these libertarian leanings. Of course, it was deemed in this era, anything that is of the right is attacked by the left. Anything of the left is attacked by the right. Even if there's no sort of, fundamental philosophical, problem between the stances of that party and, whatever the issue is, in this case, crypto. I think we're sort of a victim of this on the macro political level, and crypto is sort of eating its own also at the micro level. It's sort of like, on the national political level, it's sort of this binary thing, and on the crypto micro level, it's this tribal thing with many, many different tribes, and everybody's got skin in the game. Everybody's wallet is impacted by all of these things, because if you're in crypto, you probably own some crypto, and you probably don't own a tiny bit of crypto of every single ecosystem. I'm sure there's some people that do take kind of an index fund approach to crypto. But, I think a lot of people are not taking that index fund approach, and they're kind of partisans of, certain ecosystems. And instead of, just sort of like, it being an approach like, yeah, I'm in this ecosystem, but we're all a team together. It's definitely more of a tribalistic approach. And I think it's okay. I think that's actually okay in a lot of cases, because there are some terrible projects out there that are just extracting value from crypto. I think that is the case. I would say there are projects, we can all identify projects where they're not providing any value. They're just extractive. Other projects, I think it's fair to object to some projects because they don't embrace the sort of the original fundamental ethos of crypto. Like, they're not really about decentralization. They just seem to be, vehicles of venture capitalists to, again, extract value, even if it's, not an outright immediate rug pull. It's sort of a long-term slow motion extraction of value. I think it's okay to have preferences in crypto, but it also accomplishes the goals of the people who are trying to cripple all of crypto. When we have people in crypto who are sort of, doing this villainization thing, they're adding to the villainization of Coinbase. It was sort of like the second that complaint was filed, a switch was flipped, and it was like, oh, now it's okay to villainize Coinbase and Brian Armstrong. The problem is, the people who are trying to cripple all of crypto could do this one by one with all of us. And if it's this thing where everybody sees that the flip has been switched, it's like, okay, go ahead. It's cool to villainize Coinbase and Brian Armstrong now. The people who are trying to get rid of all of crypto could just do that to all of us one by one. I don't think it's I think it's important to be intellectually honest, because there are some actors in every ecosystem, including crypto, who probably should be villainized because they're villains. But what I'm afraid is happening is that the people who want to get rid of all of crypto are leveraging our tribalism to get us to one by one villainize whoever they attack. Like whoever strongly embraces that zero-sum game mentality is just going to also embrace the villainization of whoever they think is not in their ecosystem. I think this is probably a great strategy to divide and conquer and one by one villainize, every party they want to attack, they want to get rid of in crypto. And just to be clear, I'm not accusing this poster of intellectual dishonesty or saying that anything here is inaccurate. But what I am saying is that if you want to serve the interests of the people who would like to cripple the entire crypto ecosystem, this is definitely the way to do it. If everybody just jumps in and villainizes every party in crypto that's attacked, that's not a part of their little tribe, that'll definitely help out the people who want to get rid of all the tribes. Speaking of the people who want to get rid of all of us in crypto, some people are starting to point out that they might be making a gigantic miscalculation, and I think that's true. Think about this for a moment. Biden will be 82 years old 15 days after the election. 15 days after the election, he will be 82 years old. Cameron Winklevoss here of the Winklevi points out the Senator Warren and Gary Gensler war against crypto is going to alienate an entire generation of would-be Democrats. Winning the youth vote with Get Out the Vote is a key part of the Dem playbook. True. Dems believe the youth vote will carry the day. Crypto has already won the hearts and minds of millennials and Gen Z. They don't debate the merits of crypto. They debate where and what to build next, and millions have put their life savings into crypto. They won't forget the value destruction Warren and Gensler have caused. True. Two explanations. Blue establishment either doesn't understand what's going on with Warren and Gensler or are grossly miscalculating the impact of their actions on the youth vote this upcoming election cycle. They may not care about crypto, but they will care about the lost votes. I tend to think it's probably a combination of this. I think there are a lot of people on that side of the aisle that don't quite understand what's going on because they never really paid attention to the crypto issue. They just sort of like looked at the tech and decided they were never going to understand the tech. And so they just like ignore all crypto issues. I'm sure there are people like that on both sides of the aisle, but in this case, we're just, talking about how this one party could, decide to do this. So I think there's a lot of people who don't understand crypto and they're just ignoring every bit of crypto news. And then I think there's a lot of severe, dramatic miscalculation about the effect of this war against crypto on younger voters. I think some of these individuals are sort of looking at this like, oh, this is like us being tough on banks. The young voters aren't going to care about this. They probably hate banks because they don't have a lot of money. Young voters have the least amount of money of any age group. The younger you are, the less money you tend to have. So of course they're not going to care if we go after banks. The people who are going to care about that are the people who own bank stocks, things like that. People are invested in banks. So they're not going to care if we go after crypto. But I think what they're not understanding is it's not the same. They're not the same groups. The groups who would care about them going after banks and the groups who would care about them going after crypto are very different. And I agree with Cameron Winklevoss here. I think they're vastly underestimating how much young voters will be affected by the left seeming like the party that's anti-progress, anti-technology. These aren't the kind of stances that would appeal to a party who really should be ferociously leaning into crypto. They should be ferociously embracing crypto. If you got an 82-year-old incumbent candidate, at least he will be very shortly after the election, 15 days after, he'll be 82. If you got a candidate that old and you're trying to appeal to younger voters, the way to do it is not to try to destroy this cutting edge new technology. If you're curious about who they might go after next, here's an unsubstantiated rumor. It's unsubstantiated, but it is a rumor that's out there. Update: Gensler isn't finished. Multiple sources claiming that his next targets are low to mid-level crypto VCs. VC chatter is focused around the fact that Gary Gensler is currently unpredictable and can't be controlled. These are no easy, no downside targets for someone with continued political aspirations. So obviously the rumor is Gary Gensler very much wants to be the Secretary of the Treasury. And the implication here is that he might go after lower or mid-level VCs because they'd be less likely to be able to negatively affect his ambitions to become Secretary of the Treasury. So obviously we'll see if this comes true. It kind of makes sense. If you want to go after crypto, not a terrible strategy to try to cripple the fiat on and off ramps and then go after the VCs who have funded crypto projects in the past. Finally, here's Charles weighing in on what I'm sure is going to be a perpetually ongoing discussion of the inclusion of ADA in those assets that the SEC alleges are securities in the complaints against Binance and Coinbase. Charles says the financing was done in Japan. Notice that he calls it a financing and not an ICO. This is a good move. I like this. I would also call it a financing if I were Charles. Some of you will say it was an ICO, but financing is definitely the right word choice by Charles here. The financing was done in Japan. No ADA was sold, only vouchers. Marketing was in Japanese, priced in yen and Bitcoin. No one from the United States participated. ADA launched in 2017 as an airdrop 2 years after the voucher sale. The facts might be inconvenient to the SEC, but are facts. So he's pointing out a lot of it. He's going over a lot of different points here. And a lot of them are aimed at the geographic location of this ICO and financing, and the fact that it was not aimed at US buyers. We're going to set aside for now this vouchers versus ADA thing. Factually, I'm sure this is correct. This is very consistent with my understanding that vouchers were sold, no ADA was sold, and then the ADA was just airdropped 2 years later. We'll set the legal significance of that aside for now and just look at the geographic location of this sale of vouchers and who it was aimed at. So we've covered on the channel multiple times in the past I believe it's the Cardano Foundation website, which has some charts and things showing exactly who bought these vouchers. And certainly all of the buyers seem to have been in Asia. And I'm sure all of this is true, that all the marketing was in Japanese. It wasn't priced in dollars. No one from the US participated. This means that the SEC is pushed into arguing the secondary market sells when ADA, because ADA got over here to the North American market somehow. And the way it got here was secondary market sells, presumably through centralized exchanges like Coinbase and Binance and Kraken. And the SEC is going to have to argue that those sells satisfy the Howey test, that those were investments of money in a common enterprise with an expectation of profits based solely on the efforts of others. So obviously, this is kind of some different legal territory than if they're arguing a primary ICO in the United States. And primary ICO in the US in crypto is kind of what was happening rampantly in the 2017 ICO craze. That's not what happened with Cardano. They're going to have to argue that someone buying, through an exchange like Coinbase was making an investment of money in a common enterprise. If you just buy ADA on Coinbase, do you feel like you're investing, or I shouldn't even say, do you feel like, I should say, is it the case that you're making an investment in a common enterprise? That's what the SEC would have to argue about Cardano here. And we don't know what's going to happen in these Coinbase and Binance complaints, these suits. Obviously, there are some complications with Binance. There's a lot of other things going on there. A lot of, the things with the allegations about KYC avoidance and, whether or not the DOJ also files something criminally. There's a lot of complications there. But with Coinbase, we may get to see the status of Cardano litigated between Coinbase and the SEC. We may get to see them arguing about some number of the assets involved there. Obviously, Coinbase is going to do their best to argue that none of those assets are securities. And I kind of think that, the case for Cardano is very different than a lot of those other assets. Cardano was very careful when they did this financing in Asia. This is a very different circumstance. And I think not a lot of projects had the same foresight as Cardano. And this is kind of some new territory for the SEC to argue these secondary sales in crypto. A lot of people point to there was some discussion of this in the library case, but it wasn't exactly in this context. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. But Cardano has definitely got some good cards up his sleeve in terms of the geographic location of the actual sales of these vouchers that led to the airdrop of the original ADA in this financing. I hope you're having a great week already. I hope you had a great weekend, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.